Okay, Boker Tov, everybody. We are on today. We are on Daf Gimel in Bava Metzia, and we pick up on the top of Gimel and Aleph. We have been working out the point of the Mishnah that when these two people are holding onto a talus, you split it. The Gemara's focus has, until this point, not been on why to split it as opposed to other types of resolutions, but more been on why do you make a shavua. So first, it laid the groundwork about the idea that a person rationalizes as more heter, and the shavua will help in that regard. It compared it to a case of making bananas say you can't allow people to make a false shua. The Gemara is saying yes, but here they're not definitely lying. Part of that might be that we don't want to make a false shua. Part of it might be we don't want basting to clearly be arbitrating it or not arbitrating. Passing a judgment on a case in which clearly there's falsehood present. And then anyway, but that was a case where one person was definitely making a false shvua, and then the Gemara did discuss it in the context of sumchus when he says you split without a shvua, and the Gemara says why not say the same thing here? And the first answer of the Gemara was, well, in sumchus's case, there's more of an objective basis for splitting it, or an objective basis, not to say that they really do both own it, but an objective basis to say that each one has a legitimate claim. To which the Gemara's response back was, that might be a good basis for splitting it, because each one has a legitimate claim, but it's not a good basis for saying don't make a shvua, because a shvua, since one of those, in that case of sumchis, is sort of clearly doesn't deserve it, the shvua might actually force the other party to admit. So it really doesn't explain the idea of objective claim, why a shvua is not in place in Sumchus's case. And if Sumchus doesn't make a shvua in his case, he shouldn't make a shvua here. So that's what we're left with, the argument that Sumchus should not be making a shvua here. Maybe our mission is not like Sumchus. So the Gemara picks up and says the following. Afilu tema, we are 5 lines from the top on Gimel Amud Aleph. Afilu tema Sumchus. No, even Sumchus, who in the case about when was the calf born, says split without a shvua, would here say you split with a shvua. Why? Shvua zumi d'Rabbanan, because this shvua is all rabbinic. Kid Rabbi Yochanan, meaning now the point is we never thought it was biblical. I should just pause to say there are 3 types of biblical shvuot. There's Eid Echad, and a witness testifies. I say, to David, you owe me $100, and David says, no, you don't. I never borrowed anything from you, and I have a witness that backs me up. So David has to take a shvuah to counter the witness, the Eid Echad. 2 witnesses, I would win the case. That's Eid Echad. Morba mixas. I say, David, you owe me $100. He says, no, you don't. So I say, but I do owe you $50. Oh, you admitted to part of it. Now you got to make a shvuah on the rest. Okay. So there's motive b'mixas, and then there's also like shvuah hashomer. If he was watching my object, and there's a question about like what happened to the object, whether he was negligent or not. Okay. So nobody ever thought this was a biblical shvuah, but the Gemara, by emphasizing it's rabbinic, really even means, as we're going to see, that it's more preventative than it is necessarily about getting to the facts of the case, because we've been assuming the shvuah helps somebody step away from their rationalization and helps us get more down to the truth of the case. The Gemara is saying it's possible to say it's not serving that function at all. So what function is it serving? Rabbi Yochanan, like Rabbi Yochanan. Rabbi Yochanan, shvuah zot takanas chachamim. It is a rabbinic establishment, but a takana, right? It's not like a din. It's a takana. And what's the point of the takana? Because if you don't have this, then it's like it's anarchy. All I have to do is grab on to David's beautiful members-only jacket there. I don't know if it's a members-only jacket. His nice, fancy Armani jacket or whatever he is, his wool coat, and I'm saying it's mine. He tries to grab it. No, it's mine. And all I have to do is just claim it's mine and grab it. I have to have enough chutzpah, and we'll come to court, and I'll get half of it. Right? So haven't we learned anything from Shlomo Melech? So, so therefore, the point here is that because it's so easy for me, if I just, am not an honest guy, to make that claim and to get something out of it, Chazal said, no, we're going to demand that you make a shvuah. So the shvuah is really preventative more than it is about din. And that's why Sumchus's case, when Eli and I are debating when did my cow give birth, before or after, the transaction took place, we're not afraid that I'm going to start engaging people in these transactions and making sure my cow gives birth at an undetermined time. There's no concern there that has to be prevented. There it's all about din. Okay, since it's all about din, Sumcha says, well, you each have a legitimate claim, we'll split it. But this case, it's so easy for me to exploit the system that we need to put in a shvua to prevent me from just going and grabbing. Yes, you had a question.
Well, I was just wondering, is this to suggest, therefore, that in the period of the late prophets, let's say, there was that kind of anarchy?
Yeah, I mean, I don't know. There was a lot of problem. I know why you went to the period of the late prophet, but they're definitely like we're about to read, in the Yomi Norai and Yeshaya or whatever. Clearly there was a problem of major perversion of justice. I think a lot of it had much more had to do with the fact that they were just beholden to, to the wealthy people and the people in power, But sure, I mean, a lot of these things that the rabbis did means that before the rabbis, these protections, safeguards were not there. Okay, yes. Didn't like justice, meaning until now we assumed that the point of the shavua, whether we didn't think it was biblical, but it was to get to the facts of the case. Like we're going to use a shavua because it'll help us to get more facts on the table. It'll help you stop your rationalizing and so on. Now it might still be that, but what Gemara is saying is you could take somebody like Sumches who normally does not need a shvua, is not interested in using a shvua to get to the facts of the case. That's Sumchas is not into making a shvua. Nevertheless, even if you don't have any interest in using a shvua to get to the facts of the case, you should be implementing a shvua here as a preventative measure. Okay, so now the Gemara says like this. Okay, Lema Lasnisin. Now, what we're going to do is we're going to shift from a shvua focus to a division focus. The decision that what we do with this object is we split it. Is that really the best thing to do with this object? So let's take a look. Lema masnisin delok Rabbi Yossi. Let's say our mission is not like Rabbi Yossi. The Ikar Rabbi Yossi ha'amar imkein ma'hifsi the Ramai, because Rabbi Yossi says if that's the way you leave it, the person who's being deceitful loses nothing. Now, what's the case of Rabbi Yossi? What the case of Rabbi Yossi is that Eli and I both go ahead and deposit some money with David, who's known as an honest guy for safekeeping. Okay, one of us deposits $100 and the other deposits $200. Then it comes time for us to take back the money we deposited, and we both say we gave $200. Okay, so David, maybe he was good at safekeeping, but he should have been better at record taking because he doesn't remember who gave him what. So what do we do now? So the Chachamim say, well, we know that we each deposited 100, so we each get 100 back. And David holds on to the third 100 until, like, either, I feel it for eternity, until somebody admits, until some more facts can be adduced. It's held in escrow. Comes along Rabbi Yossi, and Rabbi Yossi says, Im kain ma'hifsid haramai. So again, it's a preventative question, right? Or if I don't know if it's preventative or whatever, but it's a question. But the point is that, like, what makes, I lose nothing. I lied. I decided I'm the liar. Now you found out. Okay, I said that it was my $200. It was only 100. But like, I feel I got nothing to lose. I'm going to get back my 100. Okay, and I'm just going to claim this other 100 is mine. And Eli's there. He, maybe he'll decide to let's just split it because he wants his, at least some of his money back. So there's nothing that I risk by claiming that the full amount is mine. So therefore, what's Rabbi Yossi's solution? You got to appreciate. To me, it's like so interesting to just read the whole story with Shlomo HaMelech and the baby, like in the background of all of this. Not every case can't be a Shlomo HaMelech and a baby. So what do you do though when people are making these types of lies? How do you figure this out, right? So this is maybe like Rabbi Yossi's solution is a variation of a Shlomo HaMelech solution. Okay, you force both sides to lose out. Okay, so the Gemara says like this. What was it? So what does the deceiver lose? You take all 300 and you put it into escrow. Okay, and then the hope is that since I'm like a liar or whatever, I'm like, clearly I have more greed in this whole situation. So maybe, and anyway, I'm lying. So maybe I will be the sooner one to give up my claim, than Eli there, who, is, maybe can hold it out longer. And certainly anyway, he's telling the truth. So he's at least less likely to give up his claim. Of course, it won't necessarily always work. Eli is still out his full 200. He also loses. I don't just lose my 100. He loses now not just 100 but 200. So maybe that even creates more of a pressure on him to compromise. So it's not necessarily going to be a solution. And it is interesting, when sort of like the threats. It's just I can't help thinking about the long article written about this. I mean, there's been a couple of articles about about how our current justice system. There's so many people that sort of plead to a lesser charge when they're completely innocent, but because they feel like it's so stacked against them, the whole system, and they don't have good defense and lawyers or whatever, to figure that they can get out of it. So just because Eli here is innocent or is the one who really has the 200 doesn't mean that I'm going to be the one to admit. Anyway, be that as it may, that's Rabbi Yossi's position. Okay, since there's nothing preventing me from lying, I lose nothing, I risk nothing. Therefore, the solution is put it all away. So the Gemara says, let's say, Rabbi Yossi doesn't hold of our Mishnah, because according to Rabbi Yossi, what we should say is, if nothing stops me from grabbing on to a David's beautiful fur coat there. Okay, so what we should do is we should say, why split it? We should say, put it all in escrow. Okay, so let's see what the Gemara says. So the Gemara says, Elamai. So what do you want to say? Rabbanan, it's the rabbis who say you take the third 100 and you put it in escrow. It doesn't fit for the rabbis either. Why doesn't it fit for the rabbis? It doesn't match up with our Mishnah. Even since the rabbis say that what you do with the third 100 is you put it away until Eliyahu comes, so you hold it in escrow. Hanami kashardami. This talus is like that third 100. This talus is the thing that's being disputed, right? 100 isn't being disputed. 100 isn't. The third 100, which is being disputed, is put in escrow. So this talus is the third 100, is the thing being disputed. Okay, because that's the one that's in doubt. So therefore, it's a problem even for the rabbis. Put the third talus in escrow. Put the talus in escrow, like you put the third 100 in escrow. Okay, that's the Gemara's question. So the Gemara says no. The rabbis, it's not an inconsistency. The Gemara says, Haimai, what type of question is that? If our Mishnah is going like the rabbis, the third 100, it doesn't belong to both of us. It's only either mine or Eli's. So therefore, they're going to say we're going to have to just put it in escrow. But in this case, it's possible that we both picked up the talus at the same time. So in that case, split it. Now, maybe one of us is still lying, probably more likely that it's not both of ours, more likely it's one of ours and the other is lying. Fine, make a shua. But the point is, we can live with the psak din of yachloku. So basically, the rabbi's point is, if at the end of this, we can make a decision tree, when to make a shua, when not, based on ramai, based on other considerations. So when do you do yachloku as opposed to escrow? Well, we're going to do yachloku if we can. If both of them have like an equal type of a claim, we're both holding on to the talus, or the way Tosfos says it, if David here is holding on to our money, he's like holding on to it on behalf of us. So it's like we're both holding on to it. So when we actually have a real equal stake in a claim, in that case, we're going to want to split it. Okay, as long as it won't be a blatantly wrong psak, as long as it's possible that we each actually do deserve half. So therefore, by the talus, we'll split it. Okay, whereas by the case of, let's say, however, just to contrast that, let's say, example, I wasn't saying I found it first. Let's say this is the way Rashi says it. I said I wove it. And Eli says he wove it. I said I inherited it from my grandfather. Eli says he inherited it from his grandfather. Okay, one of us is definitely lying. In that case, maybe we would put it in escrow. Okay, we want to split it when we have equal claims, but not if it's patently false. Okay, and therefore the third 100 in this case, where David's holding on to our money, that third 100 we can't split. That would be a patently false decision. So that works for the rabbis. For the rabbis, we get it. Okay, they'll split it as long as it's possible to be true. That's the difference between the two cases. But why does it not work for Rabbi Yossi? But if you want to talk according to Rabbi Yossi, Hashta, so let's compare the cases. In that case, definitely $100 is mine and $100 is Eli's. And nevertheless, you take money out of my hand that you know is mine. I mean, not physically out of my hand, David's holding on to it, but you take money that you know is mine and you're not giving it back to me. You're putting it in escrow. Okay, so you're putting undisputed money in escrow. in order to obviously get the person to admit. If that's what Rabbi Yossi is going to say there, in this case, where it's possible, that thing that I am claiming, the third 100 that I am claiming, it's quite possible that it's not mine, that it's David's. So if you're going to put Eli, so if you're going to put my money in escrow, the money is mine in escrow, you'll certainly be prepared to put money that is disputed, that you don't know is mine, that, I'm saying it's mine, everything it is, you'll certainly be willing to put that in escrow. So if that's what Rabbi Yossi says there, then in this case, the talis, which is disputed, you should certainly put it in escrow. Another way of saying it is that Rabbi Yossi's argument of my hifsid haramai, right, that you can't just let people make this claim and get away and win from their false claim, and that he uses a strategy of putting things in escrow to get people to admit, right? So if that's true in the case of the hundreds, it should certainly be true in this case. The rabbis aren't concerned about Ramai. They're just concerned about coming up with the best possible judgment when we don't have the facts. So they would say we do a split if it's theoretically possible that that's correct, and if it's not, we'll put it in escrow. But Rabbi Yossi, who wants to take money from people to get them to admit, so then he should be doing that in the case of talis too. Put it in escrow and get the person to admit. Yes.
Is it theoretically possible for the second case in the Mishnah, Metzia shali, kula shali?
Yeah. That's a good point. Yes. Is it possible that it's a 3/4 and a 1/4 split? Because we couldn't have both picked it up at the same time. And if we bought it from the seller, it would be unusual if the seller said, I sold 3/4 to you and 1/4 to you. That's an excellent question. Yeah, that's an excellent question. How is there, even though I'm conceding half of it, how is that really possible, right? If it was a Metzia case, it's possible it was half. We both picked up at the same time. It's possible it's all, but the 3/4, 1/4. I have to look into that. That's a really good question. I'm going to have to get back to that. Okay, so the Gemara says like this. So anyway, according to Rabbi Yossi, if there you put an escrow as leverage, you should certainly do that here. So the Gemara says, afilu temer Rabbi Yossi. No, it could work like Rabbi Yossi. Hasam vada ikaramai. Hacha miyemer di ikaramai. Ema travai badi adari agbu. In the case of the $100 or whatever, the $300, one of us is definitely lying and being deceitful, right? And therefore he says, that's why I want to force the liar to admit. And the way I'm going to force the liar to admit is take all the money and put it in escrow. Here, it's not obvious that either of us are lying. Maybe we both actually did see, at least in our own mind, we believe we're telling the truth. Maybe the Gemara says the reality is we picked it up at the same time. So there's, and therefore, taking away money and putting it in escrow to get somebody to admit doesn't make sense in this case. In this case, we could all be very innocent, okay? So therefore, we're not going to use this harsh type of a strategy in this case. Inami, or says the Gemara, another difference. Hassam, and this team, the second thing to me seems the more obvious one. Kanisle Rabbi Yossi l'Rama kechedelodi. In Rabbi Yossi's case, by putting all the money in escrow, I suffered. My $100 is being taken away from me. So that's going to force me to admit, to at least get back my $100 and admit that I don't really deserve the other 100. Halacha, in this case, might say to Islay Lodi, right? David found the object first. He found the laptop. I ran and I grabbed it and I claimed I saw it first. Okay, you're going to put it all in escrow. All right, I didn't lose anything. It wasn't mine to begin with. Right? So putting it all in escrow for Rabbi Yossi is leverage or a strategy to get the guy to admit only works if you're taking something away from him. It serves no purpose in this case. All right? So everybody get the point? Why this doesn't, you don't gain anything here, right?
The second one, I understand the first one a little bit less. Like, why is one less,
more lying than the other?
Yeah.
I know. I mean, you could say it's possible I forgot and thought I gave it to 100. But under most cases, right, I know how much money I gave or whatever. The assumption is that if I'm saying one of us is lying and knows we're lying. So if you're lying and you know you're lying, and then you're going to lose something as a result of whatever, you might admit. Okay, but in the other case, right, we might be both, telling the truth, believe we're telling the truth, it might actually be the truth. You don't see why that matters? Yeah, I mean, the whole point is to get the whole, right, well, we'll see what the Gemara does, but the whole point is to get me to admit. It doesn't do any good if I think I'm telling the truth.
I just think both of them could be equally vino.
They could be, but they could also equally be telling. The other way to say it, I hear what's bothering you, right? Because the other way to say, because what you could also say is like the shvua, maybe taking it all away will get me to stop my rationalizing, right? So you know what I'm saying. So you're right. I hear your point. The other though answer could be that. Well, I don't know. Let's see where the Gemara goes. Okay, but I hear what's bothering you. Yes.
I think maybe a way to say what's bothering him is it's even though it's not money lost out of his pocket, it's now the potential for profit that's lost.
Well, or the potential for ill-gotten gain, yes.
Yeah,
right. Well, that's sort of what the second thing that the Gemara is saying is that, but well, I mean, that's at least the distinction of the Gemara is saying. But no, but what Eli is just saying is he doesn't understand why Vada Ikaramai or not Vada Ikaramai should prevent us from making this thing. But I think the point is like if we know somebody is lying, it feels like we cannot tolerate it. We cannot sort of tolerate this, this lying and that's going on here, and therefore we can't go ahead and pretend that the court case like it's being taken on in good faith. So we have to just just put it all in escrow and wash our hands from it almost. But anyway, I hear what's bothering you about the case. All right, so let's take a look. So there are two answers that the Gemara says. Okay. Tainach Metzia, 1 minute. That idea that we can't say Yehein Munach here because the guy doesn't lose anything works in the case of the lost object. He's lying, it wasn't his object. By saying put it away, he's not losing anything. But what about the case about when we're arguing who bought it? In that case, if you remember, we said before that we both gave money to the merchant. So there actually is a way here to make us, both of us suffer. Say, we'll take the object you're fighting on and the money you gave to the merchant, and we'll put it all into escrow until you guys can work it out, and until one of you admits. So in that case, not only do I not get that beautiful mule that I was trying to steal away from Eli there, but I also don't get back my money that I paid for it because we both gave the money to the merchant. So that might cause me to admit. So why doesn't Rabbi Yossi at least say in that case, put it all in escrow? So the Gemara says, sorry, Eli. So the Gemara says, all right, so you know what? You have to say that the real issue is whether there's a definite liar or not a definite liar. Now, Tosfos actually says that even with this answer, we probably are saying that you need both criteria. In order to say put it in escrow, both it has to be that there's a loss, or else putting in an escrow is not going to achieve anything. It's not going to get me to admit. And one of us has to definitely be lying. And that's why the rabbis want to use this issue or are reluctant to split it and so on, because one of us is definitely lying. Okay, so now the Gemara says like this. Okay, Bein Rabbanan Bein Rabbi Yossi, whether for the rabbis or for Rabbi Yossi, Hasam Gabi Chenvani al Pinkaso. Let's understand how their approach of Yehein Munach fits with the following case, and we alluded to this case yesterday. It's such a beautiful sugya here, an opening sugya in the Gemara. But here our mission just says split, and the Gemara basically says, with a shvua, let's take this as an opportunity to look at all the other ways in which we do divisions, or when we adjudicate cases when we don't know who's telling the truth. No one person is muhzak, because if one person is muhzak, then we say the other person has the burden of proof, goodbye. But if no one person is muhzak, and we have no way of knowing the facts, how do we adjudicate? Let's look at all of them. Let's pull all these cases together, and let's therefore conceptualize what is like the decision tree, and what is the reason to choose one form of adjudication as opposed to another. So it's really like this really beautiful sort of opening sugi here. So the Gemara says like what? So the Gemara says, okay, let's look at this other case. The Ketani we teach in a Mishnah. I told you this yesterday, but I've hired some workers. I contract with the guy who has the cafeteria nearby. Go ahead when they come, feed them lunch. And I tell them included, part of your salary is you'll get free lunch over there at the cafeteria. And then at the end of the day, the cafeteria guy says, okay, I fed them, here's my bill, $200. And they come and they say he closed the door, he never gave us anything. Okay, so what do we do with that? So the halacha is, okay, that the owner of the cafeteria swears that he did it and I pay him, and they swear they didn't receive any food and I pay them. Okay, obviously we had earlier, yesterday, bananas who didn't allow there to be a definite false shua. But this is anyway the halacha. So forget the shvua for now. why not there? Why there do we allow both people to win? Why don't we say, right? Why don't we say, take the money from the balabayas and let it be Yehei Munach. That's the money that's being debated about. Okay, it's not like the case of the talis, where the case of the talis is that it's possible by splitting it, it'll be true. Right? Remember, we said the decision tree for the rabbis: do you split it or do you have Yehei Munach? And the decision tree was, if it's possible that splitting it is a true judgment, we'll split it. Otherwise, Yehei Munach. So in this case, it's not. We couldn't say take the $200 and split it, because it's like either one or the other. Either he fed them or he didn't feed them. Okay, so it's not possible to be true. So that should push us down the decision tree of Yehei Munach. So just take the $100. Like Abe said, take the $200 and just Yehei Munach. And then, so why do we, in this case, have me pay $200 to the workers and $200 to the cafeteria owner? Right. So what's that about? One of them is definitely lying. Okay, or I would also add, and the chalukah is not yichol liyasemes. It's not possible that the split is a legitimate judgment. So you have all the reasons why you put that third $100 in escrow. You should put this in escrow as well. So the Gemara says no. Amri hasim hainu taima. Here's the reason. Is because the store owner says to the owner, to the the guy who hired the workers, look, buddy, I did exactly what you told me to do. My isli gabi sachir. It's not my business that this worker is now claiming that I didn't do it. So, avagav the kamishtavali. Oh, you're saying he took an oath, and therefore that should mean something to me. Lo mehamli b'shvua. My dealings are not with him. He is not the guy who owes me money. And therefore, him making a shvua to me doesn't mean anything to me. I don't trust Yisrael. I know he's lying anyway. Hemante, you implicitly assumed that he was going to be honest. Why did you implicitly assume that he was going to tell the truth? You never told me, pay them at the cafeteria and get them to sign the receipt. I'm just contemporizing it. It means give them with witnesses. You never asked me to make sure, if I wanted to collect from, to protect, to make sure they didn't falsely claim anything, to make sure that there were witnesses there when I fed them and when I gave it to them. So basically what I'm saying is, this is a problem of your making. You told me to feed them. You told me you would pay them. You did not ask me to bring witnesses that I had fed them. You did not try to protect against them lying. So you basically were implicitly saying, you feed them, I'll trust your word that you fed them. And, So if anything went wrong here, they were both making competing claims, that's your fault about how you set up the system. Okay? So the schir nami amarle, and the schir can also say to the balabais, look, ana avdi avida tagabach. What do you want from me? I did a day's of work, and then I went and you told me to go to this guy and get fed, and he didn't give me anything. So, so my Isla got me chenvani. So, my dealing is not with the chenvani and that he's willing to take a shvur, whatever. All I know is I did a day's of work and you didn't pay me. Okay. And you don't have any evidence that you paid me. If you wanted him to give and you wanted to be able to prove you paid me, like, you should have set it up that way. What do I care that he's taking an oath to me? Right? I don't even know what this chenvani is. I was expecting I was going to get paid you by the end of the day. You're now claiming you made some deal with a chenvani or whatever. It's all your fault. So since the balabais basically set up a system which allows for false claims, and why should somebody else's false claim impact my ability to collect what I know is owed me? It's the guy's fault for not protecting his own interests. So he's the one that should suffer. I shouldn't be the one that should suffer. So it's a special case there because I set up the whole arrangement, and I'm the one therefore who loses out if I have not put in protections within the system. Okay, so the upshot here, by the way, is just to sort of make a quick decision chart. Is the following. First, we'll do the question about whether you split it or not, and then we'll go a little bit reverse order, and then we'll do the question about whether you make a shvua. So, do you split it or not? So, the first thing you need to know, that Tosfos points out, that's not in our Gemara, is that our Gemara deals with cases where we're considered to be sanam muchza, like in physical possession. We're both holding the talis, or it being held by a third party on behalf of us. But Tosfos points out that there's another case where we're debating about a boat in the harbor, where neither of us are muhzak, it's just sitting there, and therefore the Gemara there says, whoever, kol da'alim gavar, like fight it out amongst yourselves. So the one distinction which is not in our Gemara, but I'll just sort of, but Tosfos puts out there is, are we muhzak or not? So if it's no, that's the case of the boat, then it's kol da'alim gavar. Basically, it's like fight it out, which might mean physically fight it out, or it might mean don't bother us until one of you has a better claim. Okay? How do you make these? That's the no case. Okay, if it's yes, we're muhzak, then the next decision, is that how you make the decision things? The next question is that, is it, can it, what's the yachloku possibly true? Possibly like true. Like, is it possible that we both, actually own half? Okay, that's the question. If the answer is yes, then it's yachloku.
Machloket?
Yeah, yachloku, split it. Split. Okay, if it's no, then the answer is yehei munach. Okay, escrow. Okay, so the case where it possibly is true is the case of the talit. We're both holding on to the talit. Maybe we picked it up at the same time. The case where it's not possibly true, yehei munach, right? That's the case of the 200, 100, that's being debated about. Okay, so that's sort of like the decision tree we have here.
The split possibly true?
Is the split?
Yes.
Yeah, is the split?
Okay.
Is the split possibly true? So basically, if you don't have a claim and you're just words or whatever, get out of here. If you actually have a legitimate claim and we have to do something about it, we'd like to split it, even though that's quite likely, probably 9 times out of 10 wrong, but at least it's not patently wrong. You both have an equal legitimate claim. The best thing is cut it down the middle, okay? But if clearly that's the wrong decision, right? There's no din to that. It might be pshara, but there's no din to that. Then we just have to put the whole thing into escrow, okay? Now the problem the Gemara said is, well, the case of the the workers and the storekeeper, okay? They both, the split can't possibly be true, and we did put it into escrow. We actually gave a full amount to both. But that was a different story. That was sort of an obligation that he took upon himself in a system that he set up. So that's sort of like that's like a different case. Okay, so this is sort of the way the Gemara sort of frames this. And then the other question is like whether you make a shavua or not. Yes.
You mentioned a few different individuals here. This is based on not Rabbi Yossi's approach, right? This approach.
Oh, right. This is like the Rabbanan. Rabbi Yossi would sort of say that if there's a case of a Rabbi Yossi would sort of Rabbi Yossi would say hakol yehei munach in the case of when it was according to Rabbi Yossi, he would sort of say you put the whole thing away in escrow, even if the split could be true. No, for him, it's not true because for him, vada ika ramai, and there's a hefsed. So I think at the end of the day, once the Gemara introduces the idea of vada ika ramai,
Escrow, that's also Rabbanan hold.
Yeah, they call the third 100 goes into escrow. Rabbi Yossi just holds everything goes into escrow,
Okay.
right?
So
and in the end, the Gemara says even for Rabbi Yossi, right? But the Gemara says even for exactly, it's a question of how much. Even for Rabbi Yossi that says it all goes into escrow. At the end of the day, the Gemara said it's because there's vada ika ramai. So vada ika ramai probably does not mean that the split could possibly be true. Yeah.
What did the rabbi say if two are lying? If one is lying, so the person who's out of his actual money, what happens to his money?
If two are lying.
No, I'm sorry, one is lying.
One is definitely the case of the escrow case of 200 and 100.
Right. Do the rabbis also say
They just say that the debated money is put in escrow, but everybody gets back the 100 that's definitely theirs. Okay. All right. And then the shvua issue, the Gemara basically said maybe it's a special shvua for cases of grabbing things because of just social control, or if it's a shvua to get to the truth, you probably need to limit it to cases where there's rationalizing. The Gemara discussed about the rationalizing that happened about the Metzia or the Mekach Memkar, and probably also limit it to cases in which we're not definitely taking a false shvua. Okay, so if one of our shvuas is definitely false, okay, like the case of the chenva of the storekeeper and the workers, right, we would not make a shvua. We'll only allow for a shvua if it's not going to be a definitely false one. Okay, So that's a beautiful little summary of some of the ways in which to navigate what decision to make. And now the Gemara actually shifts gears in a radical way and gets us looking at a case of a totally different shvua of motive remixas. Tani Rabbi Chia taught. Okay, Rabbi Chia is understood to be the editor of the Tosefta. He taught the following breita. Manali biyodcha. You have a guy. I go there and say to David, Yomi $100. Nope, it's false. Never borrowed any money from you. The Eidim association, and then I bring witnesses that say chamishim zuz. Look, I said David borrowed $100 from me, 50 on Monday and 50 on Tuesday. He says he never borrowed anything. I got witnesses that at least testify that he borrowed 50 on Monday. Okay, so now he's chayiv to me $50, and now there's a question about the Tuesday money, the other $50. So Rabbi Chia says, so what does he do? Nosim lo chamishim zuz, pay the 50, obviously. The yeshava al ashar, and now he has to take a shvua on the other $50. Now, where did that shvua come from? Here's where it came from. What he admits should not have greater force than what witnesses say based on kal v'chomer. What does that mean? If I said to David, you owe me $100, and he said, no, I only owe you 50, what would the halacha be? Take a shvua. That's the classic shvua of motive miktzas, of partial admission. Okay? So what Rabbi Chia is saying is, let's say it wasn't partial admission. Let's say it was, I know he's partly lying, not because he's admitting, but because witnesses are saying that he's partly lying. Witnesses are saying that he owes 50. So is that as good as him saying he owes 50 to serve as enough of a of a foundation to say you need to take a shvua? Now, logically, you would say yes, because if the idea is that partial admission, is a way of saying that there's actually some legitimacy to my claim, right? If it's just he said, she said, whatever, it's like who the heck knows who's telling the truth? But as soon as you partially concede my point, right? Oh, so if part of my claim is true, maybe my whole claim is true, right? So if that's true, if you admit that it's partly true, then it should also be true if witnesses say it's partly true. We know that it's partly true. Maybe the rest is true. You should have to take a shvua. Okay, so that makes a lot of sense, right? If all we're trying to do is establish the facts that part of my claim is true, and that then gives a basis for thinking the rest might be true, and therefore a shvua is needed. So if it's true when David admits to the facts, it should be true if Aiden testified to facts. Jen is skeptical.
It's just my understanding of the motive of mitzvahs was like there's like a psychological
so
background.
That's what the Gemara says. Maybe Rabbi Chia's point is not so obvious, because maybe it's not just of objectively true proving that my claim is partially true. Maybe it has a lot to do with David's rationalizing. And this gets back to shvua as a way of breaking through your rationalizing. Okay, and therefore maybe it's not as relevant when he's not rationalizing at all and we just have witnesses. Okay, so let's take a look at that. So the Gemara says like this. So that's exactly the chiddush of Rabbi Chia. The Tana Tuna, now by the way, our Tana teaches the same thing. How does our Tana teach the same thing? This is going to be a very bizarre comparison. Two people are grabbing a talis. And what do we say? We say you split it. And what do you do in order to split it though? You have to make a shvua. So until now, we've been conceptualizing this shvua either as a way of getting to the facts, a regular tool that we're going to use to get the facts on the table, or preventative, from stopping people from grabbing talitot. Here, the Gemara is going to understand, what our Mishnah is? Our Mishnah is a case of motive b'miktzas. Our Mishnah is a case of the biblical shvua, okay? Like that might be why the Gemara earlier had to say it's a rabbinic shvua, because it knew there was a way of framing our Mishnah as the biblical shvua of motive b'miktzas. This is wild. What's the idea? Okay? The hahach in this case, given the tafis, since I'm holding on to it, anansadi the my tafis haididehu, my tafis haididehu. So now it's clearly because I'm holding on to it that there's evidence that David and I are arguing over this talis. The fact that I'm holding on and he's holding on is seen as if there's witnesses that half is mine and half is his. Because possession is 9/10 of the law. So for both in possession, it's evidence that it's half his and half mine. Okay. Then what is that? Therefore, that's why we should split it. What does that have to do with a shvua? Okay, the Ketani Yeshava. Okay, and so therefore, basically, what do we see? There's witnesses, it's half his and half mine. But I go and I say to David, that's all my talis. And David says, you're lying, it's all mine. And then the witnesses, the evidence, the facts say, when I said it's all my talis, the facts prove it's half mine. So it's like I said you owe me $100 and there's facts of 50, and now you have to take an oath on the other one. It is such a bizarre comparison. First of all, in this case, the facts preceded the claim. Okay, it's not like we first made a claim and then witnesses came and so on, right? Imagine witnesses came and said David owed me $50, and then I came and I said David owed $100. Would that be a motive b'miktzas? Number one, the facts here preceded the claims. Number two, there's equal facts against me, right? So if I say I have $100 and I have evidence that you owe me 50 because I'm holding on to half of it, like 50 is mine. But he has equal evidence in the opposite way, right? So to say that this is a shvuah of motive b'miktzas is like, it's crazy, okay? Maybe he just means it as a loose analogy. But put that aside, what the explanation of our Mishnah is, Rabbi Chia's claim is when witnesses testify to partial, it's like motive b'miktzas, and it is a biblical shvuah. Whether it's our Mishnah or not is a different question. So let's take a look now at Rabbi Chia's claim, okay? Okay. Why do you have to say this kal v'chomer, right? Isn't it obvious? You have evidence that half is owed that can make a shvuah. So the answer is what Jenna said. It's not so obvious because maybe the shvuah has a lot to do with my psychology and rationalizing. Okay, Shelo Tomar, who does piv who deram yeshvuah lei. It's only when I admit that the Torah says I have to make a shvuah. To the Rabbi, based on the way Rabbi explains the psychology of the whole thing. The Amar Rabbi, because Rabbi said, "Name Amar Torah, what makes us a Tana Yeshava?" Why does the Torah say that if you partially admit, you have to take an oath? Right? You could have sort of said, like Nigo, like what? You mean I could have, if I denied the whole thing, I would be off the hook because I'm actually admitting, which I did not have to do, and I'm admitting to part of it. Therefore, I'm more liable, more responsible. I'll take a shvuah. Like if I wanted to lie, I would have just said I don't know anything. So Rabbi says, no, you're not necessarily ready to make such a brazen lie. Rabbi says, Chazaka ain't on a maze pana b'fnei bal chova. You're not going to be so brazen to say to this guy who lent you $100 that you actually owe him nothing. Now, there's an interesting debate of Rashi and Tosfos. Rashi says, because you did me a tova and lent me $100, I'm not going to be so brazen to deny it. Tosfos says, that has nothing to do with doing me a tova. Let's say you even gave me an object to watch. You weren't doing me the tova, I was doing you the tova. But I'm not going to be so brazen to lie to your face to something that you know I'm lying about. Okay, so that's the issue. But anyway, I would not have, you cannot say, all right, if I was lying, I just would have said I owe you nothing. I wouldn't have the chutzpah to say I owe you nothing. Okay, so therefore, it's not a good claim that you should just believe me because I could have said nothing. Okay, I really did want to deny the whole claim. So why didn't I? Because I'm not that brazen. Okay, and therefore, I can't say, since I'm admitting, you should believe me. No. Okay, I might be lying even if I'm admitting to part of it. All right, but let's still explain why I'm going to make the shvuah. And the way Rashi frames this is, if I am lying about part of it, even if I'm only lying about the part that I think I have, at least it's not full brazenness, okay, then what good is a shvuah going to do? I'm willing to steal from you through lying. Why should I have to take a shvuah? How will a shvuah be helpful? And this is the question of chashir mamona, chashir shvuasa. This gets back to the question we had yesterday, right? If I'm a willing liar and thief and gone and whatever, maybe a shvuah will do no good. Maybe it will. We'll see about that later. But the best case for a shvuah is when I'm a rationalizer. I'm not like, I don't like, in that case, the shvuah is going to help me own up. It's such a good mussar before Rosh Hashanah. It's like, what happens when you have to look in the mirror and drop all your rationalizations and be honest with yourself? Okay, so now we're going to explain why the shvuah will be effective, even though I'm trying to steal the other half. Because what we say is I'm not really trying to steal the other half. Okay, you know what? My better self really, would want to fully admit. Okay, the Haidilo Odi, and the reason I'm not fully admitting is because I'm just trying to buy time because I don't have the cash on me. I borrowed the money. You've been nudging me about it for forever, and I just need time. So I'll get the money together and then I'll pay him off. I'm not really trying to steal the money from you. And since I'm not really trying, I'm rationalizing, the shvuah might be effective. So therefore, put a shvuah on him, force him to stop the rationalizing, force him to admit. Okay? Admit the whole thing. So therefore, as Jenna correctly said, So the argument here is not just that there's some evidence that the claim against me is true. It's that because of my admission, there's a good reason to think that what I'm just doing is avoiding and rationalizing, and a shvua will be effective. Okay? Whereas if there's witnesses that I owe part, maybe I am lying, but maybe a shvua won't be effective. Maybe I'm not a rationalizer. Maybe I'm like a total ganav because I said you didn't owe me anything and I was never planning on paying you anything. Okay? And maybe a shvua won't be effective. Okay, but when witnesses testify that you can't say that I'm just rationalizing. I actually was denying the whole claim. Aim low, maybe don't make a shvua. Maybe a shvua will not be effective in that case. Kamash Mulan Kavachomer. And so the Kavachomer teaches us witnesses are just as effective as my own admission. Now, the question is, how do you actually answer that? That's a good basis for distinguishing between those two cases. Okay, so there could be two answers, neither of which the Gemara says here. Right? Everybody understand the question, right? If I'm denying the whole thing and there's witnesses that I owe part, if I'm not rationalizing because I was denying the whole thing, why will the shvua be effective? And there could be two answers. One answer could be that that I am rationalizing. That the same way I rationalize and deny half because I'm trying to get the money together, I'll deny the whole thing and I'm trying to get the money together. So maybe I have a little more chutzpah, but at the bottom line, the end of the day, I am not trying to steal that money. I am going to pay you back. I just need to get you off my back for the time being. So I just need to say, no, you don't owe me anything. Stop bothering me. And then eventually I'll get the money together. So because I'm not really trying to steal the money, I'm just trying to push you off, even when I deny the whole thing. So maybe a shvua will get me to admit. So one explanation is even when I'm denying the whole thing, the shvua can still be effective because I could still be rationalizing in that case. The other explanation could be maybe this is what the Gemara is going to say later. Chashed amamona, lo chashed ashvuasa. Even somebody who's willing to be a knowing ganav and a goslin is not going to take a shvuas sheker. Okay, so even if I am planning on stealing that money, the shvua might still be effective. And therefore, once we have witnesses that substantiate the claim against me, part of the claim against me, we're going to make me make a shvua even if I'm not rationalizing, even if I'm trying to steal the money from you. Okay, so that's basically what we say. Either the conclusion is A didn't make me take the shvua, either because I will rationalize even in the case when I'm denying the whole thing, there'll be a degree of rationalizing, or it doesn't require the rationalizing. Okay, even if I'm a real rotten, lying, thieving person, I am not going to take a shvuas shove. Okay, I will not touch muktzah on Shabbos, no matter how much of a ganav I am in my business. And sadly, that's the reality way people think. I'm not going to take God's name in a shvuas shove, no matter how much I'm willing to steal money from somebody else. Okay, you want to say something, Jen?
I don't understand where the Kavachomer reasoning is.
Oh, so we haven't put out the Kavachomer. So now we're going to advance the Kavachomer. Now, what you have to know about the Kavachomer is that the Kavachomer does not get to the logic of the argument. The logic of the argument is there's a better reason to say it by admission than by witnesses. I just explained to you now how it also could make sense in the case of witnesses. But it's not that witnesses are better. The better logic is the case of admission. The Kavachomer is a purely formalistic argument. We're going to show elsewhere that witnesses are more weighty than admission, and therefore we're going to say, so if self-admission leads to a shvua, witnesses lead to a shvua, because witnesses are more weighty evidence against me. It's a very funny argument because it ignores the logic of the case and just looks in the sort of formal sense that witnesses are weightier. That's the Kavachomer. So let's take a look at the Kavachomer. Umay Kavachomer, what's the Kavachomer? What? Umapiv, when it comes to my mouth, I can't obligate myself through my self-admission. And the Gemara is going to say, what the heck are you talking about? Of course you can. We'll get to that in a minute. Mechayv shvua leads to obligating me in a shvua when I admit to something. Witnesses that can obligate me to pay money. How much more so should the weight of witnesses make me make a shvua? So the Gemara says, your mouth, your self-admission doesn't obligate you to pay? What are you talking about? One of the biggest principles in Dinei Mamonis is that your own admission is like 100 witnesses against you. If you admit that you owe money, you got to pay. So what does it mean? So the Gemara says, no, my mammon knas. No. We don't mean like mammon in the sense of I'm trying to find the word that's different than knas. Anyway, mammon is like a standard financial obligation. Okay, monetary obligation. Like I stole from you, I borrowed from you, I damaged your property. If I make any of those claims that I owe you some type of compensation or debt, then my admission obligates me. But if I say, I was a ganav and I owe you kefel, so my admission obligates me to pay the principal, but not the double, not the second, because that is seen as a court-imposed punishment, and if that's a knas, a fine is not seen as a debt. A fine is like a court-imposed punishment, and that, like lashes or like execution, can only come through external witnesses, not through my own self-admission. It's like the right against self-incrimination. Right against self-incrimination doesn't mean I can't say I owe you $100. But it does mean I can't say that I can choose. In American court, it's a right of choosing not to testify. Anyway, but moving on. Okay, so the Gemara says like this. But we're talking about knas. My own knas. Umar pi, when it comes to my own admission, she'ein mechayvo knas. It doesn't obligate me in a monetary fine. Mechayvo shvua still, if I admit, leads to me making a shvua. Witnesses, if they say that I was a ganav or whatever, I have to pay the fine. So therefore, it is external evidence, and in that way more weighty. Okay, how much more so should their testimony lead to me making a shvua? The Gemara says, 1 minute. It's not true that witnesses are always weightier. I will give you a case where admission is weightier than witnesses. What's that case? If you admit that you did a sin, that it's deserving of kares, and you did it b'shogeg unintentionally, then you bring a korban. And all the times when the Torah says you bring a korban, it says either v'hit vada, that you confess your sin, also relevant. Okay, you confess your sin and you bring a korban. Okay, let's say you don't confess your sin. Let's say you say, I never sinned. And witnesses are saying, no, we saw you eat that chaylev, that forbidden fat, b'shogeg. We know you weren't intentional. We heard you actually say, oh, isn't this a nice piece of kosher meat? You weren't aware. Nobody's claiming you're a Russia, but we saw you eat it b'shogeg and you have to bring a korban chatas. And you say, no, it's not true. I never did it. You don't bring a korban. You don't bring a korban even if there's objective testimony that evidence you're obligated unless you admit your sin. Also, good musar for this time of year, right? It has to start with vidu. It has to start with admission. So your admission is more powerful than witnesses because your admission will lead to a korban when witnesses will not. Okay? The Gemara says like this. No, malapiv shekei mechayvo korban. Tomer be'edim she'ein mechayvo nosa korban. Where it says, so you see, so it's not true that witnesses are always weightier. How low kasha? That's not difficult. Rabbi Chia to Rabbi Meir Svirole, he was like Rabbi Meir. Damar edim mechayvin osa korban mikal v'chomer. Because the same kal v'chomer we're using here, Rabbi Meir uses to say that witnesses do make you bring a korban, even if you say you didn't do it. Not turn to the Mishnah. Amar lo shnayim achalta chaylev. 2 people say you ate forbidden fat. Umar lo achalti. No, I didn't. Rabbi Meir mechayev. Rabbi Meir says, okay, you got to bring a korban, even if you didn't admit it. You're right. The objective reality that you did that sin, even if it comes through no acceptance of guilt or responsibility on your part, the fact that we have witnesses means you bring a korban. The chachamim potrim, and the rabbis say you're exempt. Amar Rabbi Meir, says Rabbi Meir, if 2 witnesses can lead to executing a guy, certainly they should force him to bring a korban. Now, of course, there's a big difference. Execution is a punishment. Korban is atonement. Atonement require me to first admit and accept my responsibility. But Rabbi Meir doesn't see it that way. Maybe he sees korban as more an objective way of fixing what's been metaphysically set awry. You sinned that led to some metaphysical rupture. You have to fix it. You have to bring a korban. I don't care if you accept your guilt or don't accept your guilt. And he says, because witnesses are more weighty. What do the rabbis say back? So the rabbis say back, Amrulo, they said back to him, no, man yitzalomer mezida, you see, you taught there. No. He could say that he could always say, even if there are witnesses, he could always claim, okay, I ate it, but amazing, so get off my back, I don't have to bring a korban. Okay? Now, Tosa says that's not really what the rabbis want to say back. What the rabbis really want to say back is bringing a korban is not about, establishing the facts of what happened. Bringing a korban starts by accepting your guilt and responsibility. But to you, Rabbi Meir, that thinks that it's just about establishing the facts, even that you don't know. Because even if the witnesses saw me eat it, it's not necessarily true that I ate it b'shogeg. You can't prove that I'm chayav a korban. Maybe I was eating it b'mezid, okay? But the deeper issue is to bring a korban, does it start with, vidoy, acceptance of guilt, acceptance of responsibility? So, back to the point, Rabbi Chia says witnesses are always weightier than admission. The Gemara, and therefore they should lead to a shvuah. And the Gemara says, 1 minute. When it comes to korban, admission is weightier than witnesses. And its answer is no. Rabbi Chia would say, like Rabbi Meir, they're part of the same approach. They always want to give more weight to witnesses. So that he actually would say that even by a korban, you go by witnesses. If you go by admission, you go by witnesses. Okay, so within this idea that witnesses are always weightier, witnesses should also lead to a shvuah. All right, so we will pick up with this tomorrow to continue the argument about whether witnesses are weightier and do witnesses lead to making a shvuah in this moda b'mixas type of a case.
How can they disagree about whether he has to bring a